Hello. Welcome back to the David Watson podcast. And in this episode, there's a saying where every day is a school day. And I felt like in this hour, I had some of the best lessons I've ever had. Just those moments where the light bulb switches on and you think, damn, I've been looking at that the wrong way. That happened to me a few times in this episode. And yeah, it was psychology. I was talking to a gentleman who's come up with these. I'm not going to tell you. I want you to listen and listen to him well. Smart man, very nice, really enjoyed it, and I hope you get as much from it as I did, because it has been an absolute pleasure recording this episode. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you today?
David, I'm fine. Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be spending some time with you today.
No, it's good of you to come on, and thank you for your patience. I was just, for the benefit of everyone else, I was just explaining that it's a new laptop, and we had a few technical difficulties because it turned out I hadn't switched on the audio on my end. So the learning curve is still a bell curve, which is fantastic. It's nice. Yeah, and you were just explaining that it's a really busy period as you're promoting right now.
We are, we started putting books out. We have what I call the Fix Yourself Empowerment series. So it's books that are designed to help people deal with their own problems. So we started in 2019, and now we're up book number 4 that will be published. We hope by the end of May, and it will be by the end of May. And then end of the year, we'll have the 5th book out. We're going to do Fix Your Addiction at that point. So it's been busy. A lot of writing, a lot of interviews, a lot of radio, TV, podcast, all that sort of thing. But it's fun.
Yeah. Do you have it was going to be ironic because it's a podcast, so it's a podcast question, I guess. Is there a common theme of the questions you get asked? So are there things that people just want to know?
Yeah, the themes that we see a lot of are, how do I get, how can I be more happy, less angry, less anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things. That's what I get a lot of, and when I write, everything I do is very practical. So I'll give them information, which everyone does, but then I give people the exact steps. I say, okay, fine, you're dealing with this. These are the things you have to do if you want this to get better, and you just got to stay consistent with these things. So I think that's what sets it apart a little bit. That in everything I do, in all the books I write, in every chapter, it says, okay, do these things.
That's true, because that's an important factor. Because I used to, going back a few years, I'd watch lots of videos on YouTube, and it was always 10 things you shouldn't do, 10 things I don't do, and 10 mistakes everyone makes. And I'd watch these and consume these, and at the end of it I'd think, I'm not any wiser, am I? It took me a while to realise I wasn't getting any smarter, because they never told me the 10 things, the 20 things that they do. And
that's the thing. When I started writing, did a lot of research on how we wanted the chapters to be, and I looked at all these self-help books, and they're 30, 40 pages of all this information, no advice. So we cut it down, and my average chapter is 8-9 pages, and it's here's the topic. Let's say we're dealing with anger. You're angry. Here's the topic. It's everything you need to know about anger. At the end of each chapter, here are the 5 or 6 things to do. It might be with anger, might be how you talk to yourself in your own mind, and how you get angry and have angry thoughts. Well, at the end of the chapter, I'm going to give you the advice to deal with that type of thinking. So the chapters are small. It keeps people focused, especially men who don't read self-help books a lot, who are saying, oh, wow, I can do this. I'll read 8 pages today and get those action points. And then we're seeing a lot more men coming along to read this, and the women always are checking in with us. And then the nice thing about the book is, a year from now, you start slipping a bit, you go right back to that chapter, read 8 pages, and there's your action steps again. So it was all designed with that in mind.
Because that one of the things I found with my own coaching practice, and just generally talking to people, is there's I'm not sure if it is a modern dilemma. And the reason I say that is because it's versus how much we used to record compared to how we record things today. Is how much of it is people just want the quickest fix. Because it's a human habit. Humans are designed, the way we think, the way we act, to find the most efficient ways of doing things, which kind of is a blessing and a curse.
And you know what? You're right on target. I looked at that and I said, okay, this isn't the way I'd like to see people learn, but it's what we have, They want the old Reader's Digest version, if you will.
Yeah.
And I always call it microwave learning. Everything's fast, So that's what they're saying. Give it to me quick. I want it, and then tell me what to do. Then I can go do that. So when I decided to start this whole series, I said that's the way we'll do it. We'll incorporate a lot of the old, so we get that information in, but we have to present it in a way that we're gonna hold their interest. And and the other thing you look at is the old theory told us that about if we read 100 pages, we'll remember about 20 pages of it. So for me to put 30, 40 page chapters down, I know that's not going to work. But if I put 8 pages down, geez, now they're going to remember at least 7, 6.5. That's a little different than it was before. And then they're going to those action steps. So we get a lot of feedback on the way the book was written. A lot of awards just because it was written that way.
Because it's important as well, isn't it? Because we live in this kind of attention deficit culture now. And, once upon a time, you take pride in reading a book that had 1,000 pages. It was almost like a badge of honor itself. And within that, people would go into minute details of, the way we think, why we think, how you can improve yourself. And but now, nobody is, unless you're an academic of some description, nobody wants to do that. They want it to be short, sweet, concise, clear, not cute. Bing, bing, bing. And it's become, I guess it's just become more and more important to adapt to the way that people want to be communicated to.
Yeah, and the way the learning, it's one thing, as you say, to say, this is how we like to be communicated to, but the other part is our brains are changing, and we're accepting it. The brain accepts information much faster these days. In my days, when I was in college, if you needed to go write a report, you had to go to the library because there was no internet, and get this card catalog and go find it on the shelves and hope the book was there, and that's how we had to do things. Now they can just go on quick and in 2 minutes have the answer to what they want. So everything goes real fast. Plus the culture moves so quickly. The older days it was a little bit slower. Now it's fast. So it's almost like you have to grab them in between their sprints in order to say, okay, slow down a bit so you can get this piece of information. So with that in mind, we keep the chapters short. We keep the advice right there. They don't have to look for anything. It's right in front of them.
You just said something that I've just realized. So I've often spoken the opposite. I've often said that one of the conditions that we have trouble with today is the fact we can't adapt to this lifestyle. But actually, I'm wrong. I'm completely wrong. We have adapted. The problem is people like me are still thinking in an old way.
Well, and I remember that we were just talking about music. I said, geez, I didn't like this. And I said, I remember my parents saying that we're not adapting. So it doesn't mean we have to accept everything, but I think we have to be willing to kind of try it on for size, if you will. But the bottom line is, I tell you, interesting little things happen. I was coaching soccer, and the kids now are wearing their pants.
Sorry,
way down,
I have to interrupt. You mean football? I'm British.
Oh, yes.
There's this weird thing. As soon as it says soccer, we got to correct it. Yeah, so you mean football. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were coaching soccer / football. Yeah.
I was coaching football. So, and the young person had his pants way down. I'm saying, get your pants up. And finally, at the end, I said, you're not listening. He says, you don't understand. our brains don't work that way. We wear them down, and if we pull them back up near your navel, it doesn't feel good to us.
Yeah.
And that made it click. And I said, this whole thing is changing, and what used to be is no longer there, because the way the brain works doesn't only interpret information structurally, physically, it begins to change. So their brain, what the way they process today is not the way we processed. So if I'm going to reach all these people, then I've got to go with these shorter chapters. I've got to be quicker about it. People our age they'll adapt. They'll say, okay, fine, I can get this in 5 or 6 pages. I'm going to sit there for the whole time and read it anyway. The other person's not going to. They're comfortable reading a headline and then interpreting it in some fashion. They don't have all the information, and they're coming to conclusions without information. That's scary. So how do we deal with that? We get all that information, we condense it, we put it in short chapters so they can see it and they can interpret it. Then they can apply the steps I'm talking about, that advice section.
Yeah, because I've realized my thinking hasn't adapted to the way that people are, the new type of communication, because I'm one of those, and like I said, I've literally realized this as you were pointing it out, is I'm somebody that will try and pull somebody back to the way that I learn and the way that I would teach and coach. Is okay, we do things like this because it's proven, it's effective, it's it's one of the reasons I for want of a better term, can be a more successful problem solver than you, is because I used to get bored and I had to think about things. I had to go to the library on a Saturday and research something, and it's well proven, well documented, it worked. But yeah, you're right. The modern brain of my niece and her friends, and my nephew and his friends, who are much younger than me, still in their teens, they've adapted to react rapidly and consume, in a sense, maybe only the necessary information for the immediate task. Whereas I might read a book and by the end of that book know 20 things that I might never need to know, but would feel that I'm well-rounded and well-developed in an area of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's the way we all used to learn. So I looked at that and I said, okay, if I don't begin to change and transition and understand the way they're thinking, number one, I'm going to be behind the flow now. But the other thing is, I have all the wisdom to teach them, but they're not going to spend the time listening to me, and they're not going to allow me to try to slow them down. So if I'm going to be able to impart some of this wisdom to them, I've got to do it on terms they're going to accept, because the bottom line is, whether we like it or not, I'm in my 60s, whether I like it or not, they're taking over the world. We're not.
Yeah.
We're going. So I can say, all right, let me mentor you. I'm not going to challenge you. I'll look at the way you're doing this, and I'll provide some good reference points for you, some information, and I'll hopefully open up your mind to some questions. Then they'll say, okay, you said that, but what about this? And I'll be able to go with that. Fighting this only puts us in a position to be antiquated, and they won't listen to us. Doesn't mean that I like what they have to say, and I'll tell them when I don't, but I don't come on like they say, the old fogey who doesn't know what he's talking about. I do know what I'm talking about. Now, communicating it to you is a whole different story, is what I'll say. So, fine, I'll talk your language, but you're going to hear what I got to say when I'm doing it.
Because the reason I'm almost fixated on this is I have, where's my finger? People who are audio, so you can just see that picture there. And what people can't make out is that actually has a smiley face, a set of glasses, and what's supposed to be a trout. And it was one of the first training programs I ever wrote. And to remind me that a smiley face is because all the research just shows that actually it's better to be happy, to find things that make you happy, and you'll actually live a healthier, happier life. You will. The simple trick is just find, if you know something makes you happy, repeat it. It's incredibly simple. But the glasses was to always remind me, if things don't make sense, you're not looking at it correctly. And it was originally, I heard this, I saw this back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, Leicester City were on their way to win the Premier League in the England Premier League, and everyone said it's impossible, it won't happen. But they were still winning games, and they were still top of the league. And it was just like, well, and even almost up until there was only a few games left and it was inevitable, people were still arguing that it's not possible. And it's like, well, it is. And then this is to do with it was a journalist who predicted that Donald Trump was going to win the first presidency. And somebody said, like, and he predicted it early on. And somebody asked him afterwards, like, how did you know? He said, because despite what everybody said, he was still winning the polls. So what was I not seeing? And the funny thing, and the reason I bring that up is because I've got that there as a daily reminder, and you've just pointed out something that I haven't seen. And yet I've spent hours thinking, why am I not a more effective communicator to people? Because I'm supposed to see the bigger picture. And it's just like, yeah, that's why. Because I'm actually been looking at people critically, saying the problem is that you're not prepared to absorb information. And that's not the problem. The problem is I'm delivering the information wrongly.
Yes, and that's what I came to. I particularly what I do for a living. I mean, I'm a psychologist. I counsel people all day long, and I have the answers. But then I started to realize they're not getting the information. I needed to change the way I delivered it. That's all it was just to change. It's sort of like, the analogy I've always used is, if I'm going into another country and they don't speak the language, I can impart all the knowledge in the world in my English, but if I don't learn their language, they're not going to get anything from me. And it's just, and this new generation, if you will, has begun to speak differently, and their brains are interpreting information differently. I need to understand how they're interpreting information. Then I can do some things.
How did you realize that?
You know what? I made a decision a long time ago to keep my mind open. That doesn't mean that I agree. Once I said that, because a lot of times what people think is, if I listen to what you say, then somehow I'm on board, and I don't want to be on board. So I've always said, I don't have to agree with you, but I do want to understand you. I do want to understand where you're coming from, and I want us to have a dialogue that makes sense. You don't have to agree with me either, because that's all irrelevant. The agreeing, that's not nonsense. The foundation for communication is what's important. Can we establish a new way to communicate that allows both of us to hear and understand what the other person is saying, to get all the facts and get the emotion out of it, and get the anger and the fear and all that out of our communication, the unwillingness to listen, the arrogance, all that. If we get that out and just say, you know what, I'm going to listen to what you have to say today. Not showing where I'm going to go with it, but I will guarantee you'll have my ear, and you'll have that courtesy from me.
The thing I'm trying to sort of break down to a smaller step is that there was a point at the beginning of this. I'm listening to you, and there's like this light bulb moment where I realise what I've missed, what I didn't see, despite the fact I have a daily reminder reminding me not to be blinkered in the way that I think, communicate and talk. And so, but it was listening to you and the way you described the full, the books you have, the series of Fixing Yourself, and the way that you communicated it, and what you realized about how people now in the modern world are absorbing information much more rapidly. But there must have been a point where you saw the fault in how you were looking at the world, and what I'm fascinated by is, like, how did you see that? What is it that you have in place that allows you to see that I don't have?
You know what? A lot of that came from my own children. We have four kids, and now that they're of course they're adults, they're age 36 to 30. But when they were younger, I started to see that they were just not tuning in the same way. I was trying to teach them my way, and they weren't doing it. The schools were already beginning to make some changes that I didn't agree with, the way they were doing things. But then I looked at it, I said, oh man, there is a flow, and now I'm starting to feel it. And I'm gonna be left behind. with all this knowledge that I've put together, with all this my abilities to, those are my gifts to help other people. I'm not they're not hearing what I'm saying anymore. So I just, changed it a little bit, and I said, okay, let's look at what's on your mind, and it enhanced my listening skills. And when I did that, I started to say, oh boy, I'm out of step here, and if I don't change this, I'm going to be another one of those people with a ton of information and nobody listens to.
That's
So
a really good.
that.
That's a phenomenal skill set to have.
Yeah. It's all about listening. And really, if you think about it, you just said, "Hey, I'm out of step here," but you were listening to what I had to say. That's all we need to be doing.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we're losing in our cultures. We are not listening to people anymore. We are reloading all the time. Someone's talking, and now we're thinking about the next thing we want to say, or how we negated what they're going to say, because it's about what we're thinking, and we're not listening the way we were anymore.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's just that simple. Just listen better, and listening better is just being quiet. Just listen. It sounds so simple, but we make it so complicated.
I know. When I did, the other thing I do now is I consciously say to myself, okay, how are they processing this?
Yeah.
I say that to myself because once I ask that question, it pulls me out of the path I was already thinking I was going to take, and now I'm monitoring what they're doing. And I know, of course, person who does what I do for a living, you do monitor what people are doing, and you watch body language and all those things. But I started to take myself out of my own rhythm, and had to establish a different rhythm. And now, I can take a young person, a 15-year-old, whatever, an 18-year-old, and to bring them into my office, and I can communicate on their level, and I can actually begin to maneuver the conversation just a little bit so that they're not going too fast. Because even though that's the way they're thinking, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that the culture has changed. But if I work with them, I can quickly maneuver just a little bit so that they change just a little.
Yeah.
And there's our foundation for communication.
But that's something the greatest teachers have always done, isn't it? At any level, it's realizing how to communicate with somebody so that they will. I suppose you listen to them first, so you can learn how to communicate, so they'll then listen to you. And
it's the way you do it. Just as we're talking today, we didn't just schedule this and I said, okay, I'm going to meet with him today, and David and I are going to do an interview. I went back and heard 5 of your previous interviews. Oh, wow. I was not really concerned with what the guest had to say. I was just watching your linguistic style, if you will, okay. The way you were. Okay, so now I'm seeing how he's speaking. When I'm sitting down, I'm ready to go. I pretty much know what I need to be doing because this is the way you're listening. This is the way you're doing some things. It enhances the efficacy of what we're doing.
Yeah, because there's something interesting I do. So obviously, I get sent the press pack sort of thing, and I don't look at anything until the day of the podcast, because I'm aware that I have a personality that if I read something about you, I will start researching who you are, and I'll lose my curiosity. And because I lose that curiosity, I don't go into the interview and the podcast with the same, I wonder who you are. And that's ultimately the purpose of my podcast. The one question that I always have is when I first meet you is, I wonder who you are. And even though I have this information, I want to know who the person is that came to be who you are today. And the only way I get there is by not looking at who you are.
And I saw that, excuse me, in your interviews. What you do is it consistently evolves. The conversation evolves and it grows. And as you're getting to know me more, then you're changing the way you're doing things as the conversation flows. That's what I saw when I was looking into your interviews and seeing that style.
Yeah,
So then I look and say, okay, fine, this is going to evolve, and which means this temporary little relationship we have going is going to evolve. So now I put myself into that, and then I take all the knowledge and whatever else we're going to be talking about, and I put it into that format.
yeah, I remember. I don't remember who I learnt it from, or where I first saw it, but it was one of the things that when I decided I wanted to do a podcast, I wanted to focus on is there's this idea that anybody, doesn't matter who they are, if they are interesting for a period of time, if they are passionate about something, and if you just listen to their passion, you'll discover how interesting people can be. And but of course, the counter to that is I can't find out who you are until I'm about to talk to you. Because then I'm just like, oh, why? How did you get so passionate about this? And how does that passion relay outwards? Because, like I said, I'm fascinated because you've done the opposite of what basically when did self-help books really come into my sphere? I suppose I first started noticing them around the 80s. I was born in 74. I probably became aware of them in the 80s. I mean, they'd been around a lot longer. And then they big in the in the 90s and the noughties again, and they were always getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you've done something I've never seen somebody do before, where you're like, and you made a very good point, the Reader's Digest. And there'll be people that have never heard of Reader's Digest, but one of their great, amazing things they did was literally, as the name says, I'll digest a topic. And it's an easy read, but it will be essential, and and that's why they had a huge fan base for so long.
And that's what you're doing. You're just looking at the other person and saying, how are you going to learn? How am I going to present this to you so that you understand it? And that's what I get a lot from my readers. They'll come back and say, okay, you got this. How did you even get to the point that you did this? And I said, because before I started writing, which is not what writers do. They get a topic in their head and they go. I took a step back and said, okay, besides learning the industry, I need to learn about the readers and what they were doing. So I took a year to research how people were learning when it came to the written word. And it was just the opposite of what I was seeing, particularly in self-help. We really have to be very focused on the topic, how we're going to present it, and what they need to do with it. And that's how they're learning. And across the board, that's how they're learning. And what I'm also seeing is that people older, 40s and 50s and into 60s, are now making that transition just a bit. And they're looking for the fast headline, and they're looking for a conclusion. And that's the balance here. Was everyone's trying to go to a conclusion, but they're getting conclusions, but they're doing it without the necessary information. So oftentimes they're wrong, or they're overly emotional or angry about it. So if I could slow it down just enough so they get the information, that's that 8 pages. Now we can get to the conclusions. Now do these things, and they can see how that developed. There's that information. There's that path, and he got here. Now I see how he got there. Now it makes sense.
Something I'm still fascinated by, and my apologies, because I'm probably going to ask you the same question, just reword it. As I'm listening to you, there's this ability that you're communicating where you're able to do something that I don't see people do, which is step back. And so for everyone else, like there's that phrase, and it's like an outsider looking in. When you're an outsider looking into someone else's problems, you see the whole picture. And there's that phrase, you can't see the wood for the trees, which translates as you're so in depth in what you're doing, you can't actually see what's around you, which is who you are. But you've somehow navigated that step by being able to, like that form of meditation where they say you should be able to just observe your thoughts, not be attached to them. And you seem to have, okay, here I am in the center of the picture, but I'm going to step back as if I'm in a gallery and look at it and see what else is around me, including the frame, what else is on the wall, and who's walking past and what are they looking at. But I I don't think I've had a conversation with somebody that's articulated that to me before.
You know,
And I'm hung up on it.
you know, the mind is one where it learns by repetition.
Yeah.
It starts conscious because we run on an autopilot. Our mind gets in a zone, and we just go with that. All I've done is said, I'm taking it off autopilot. I am going to take that step back. And while all this other stuff is seemingly what I'm supposed to be looking at, there's a backdrop here that exists within. I want that backdrop too, because usually what we're looking at is nothing more than a symptom or an outgrowth, so to speak, of the whole flow of things. I want the flow. Just like in the conversation I said, I want to have that foundation. Everything takes off from that point. So one of the things I teach people a lot is slow down a bit. I'm not saying slow down your whole life, just slow down your thoughts. So when you're in something, it happens. You don't react and emote quickly and come to a conclusion and say, I'm going to do this. Oh, this is what it is. Because you already lost if you're doing that.
Yeah.
If you take that step back and say, well, let me look at the whole picture. It'll take you an extra minute. You won't get that immediate gratification. And then you walk away and say, I got this. And I saw this. And that person said, well, you said that, and I never heard that before. I know they did.
Yeah.
They just didn't listen. You know, so it is just taking the time. And the other part of it, interesting as it sounds, is I approach everything with a humility. I know how much knowledge I have. I know that's what I've done. But I always back it down as though I have none. So when I walk into a situation, I open up. And I say, okay, bring it. Bring what you got. So I allow it to come in. Most people don't do that. We don't allow it to come in. We feel threatened that that's going to get in. And you know, no, that's not what I want. You're not going to change me. You're not going to make me do it your way. I don't worry about that. I don't put any ego into it. You got it, bring it, because I'm strong enough on the inside to fend it off if it's not going to be a good thing, or it just might be something that makes me say, ooh, I didn't have that piece. I'll take that one.
So how did you... So, yeah, my next line of thinking is you've stepped back and observed how people are reading and absorbing information, and you've kind of, right, okay, so that's what I need to adapt. How do you then digest all of that information, which is actually important, and each one could be a 200-word chapter? How do you pull out, this is the headline that they need to learn about, that will either adapt the way they think or get them to become more interested in the way they think? How do you pull out the correct information?
By not trying to bring it in to what I already have and change it. I don't try to change it. I take it for what it is, and when I can do that, it keeps its form, so to speak.
Yeah.
But what we typically do is bring something in, and then we quickly rearrange it because either we don't like it, or it's threatening, or we fear it, or that's the way we think, and we rearrange it. I don't rearrange it. If you said it, I bring it right in and let my mind entertain it. It's not going to contaminate anything. Because I've already made a decision that if I don't see the worth in it, I'm not going to do anything. But I am definitely giving it the moment, or the minute, if you will, to come in and let's do some things. Let's see where it goes.
So when you were writing the series of books, and how did you do that then? How did you condense them into there? Like you were saying, some of the chapters are only 8 pages, and they could be 10 times that. How do you how do you separate? Because my argument would be to suggest that everything you know is essential to know. So how do you you'll get by? This really will help you.
If I said to you, when we started talking about doing the interview, I said, David, I'm only going to talk about this, and I'm not moving off point.
Yeah.
You would say, yeah, there's all this other stuff out here. And I'd say, that's great, but I'm only going to talk about this. When I write the chapter, that's
Okay.
what I'm doing. I'm staying on point. Now, I'm also entertaining that there'll be some things that may come in and
Yeah.
affect that, and I'll look at those. But when I write it, I'm saying, okay, I've looked at all this information, but to stay on point, for example, a chapter might be boundaries and how to set up boundaries so that people don't violate your boundaries and push you in different directions. And okay, what's important about that? Well, learning how to set up what you want, communicate it, and then defend it. Those are the three pieces in there.
Mm.
I'm going to tell you this is what I want because I've looked at it. Now, when you try to violate it, and you will, because that's what human nature does. You set up a fence. I'm going to try to climb it. So now I'm going to defend it. I'm staying on those. So here's the information, just on those, just on that. And then there's my action steps, which come right from that information. So it's bottom line, staying on point. How many times have you watched, Parliament get together and they screaming and yelling at each other, and you look at it. I know the argument started here.
Yeah.
Now it's over here. And the Labour
Every
Party
time
says
I've
this,
ever
and the other
watched them.
party says that, and you're saying, well, this is really, because when I've watched it, I said, how did they get anything done there? They're screaming. There seems to be no decorum there to me.
And I'd agree with you entirely. We feel the same.
Right. So I think, look at that. So it's the opposite of that. It's to stay on point. We are only going to talk about this. I don't know how that forum works, but I know how mine has to work because then someone's reading it. I'm not there to explain it. I can't say, well, no, well, it's this and it's that, and that came into it too. That's not going to happen. So I've got to stay on point where they say, okay, I can follow this whole point through for these, few pages, and I know where it's going now because that's the other part. They say, okay, now it's going to go to the advice. And after they start reading the book, then they start saying, all right, I know what he's doing. It's going to be these 8 pages or 9 pages or whatever, and it's going to go to advice. So now they start reading that in their minds, but saying, okay, now this information is being pointed to practical application. Now their learning curve includes that. They know. So when people have gotten to the second and third book, they say, I know what I'm doing already. I know what you're going to do. I know that we're going to read this and I'm going to go to the action steps and I'm all prepared and ready to go. That's learning as they learn it today.
One of the things I've often talked about, and I've definitely died on the hill defending this point of view, and I definitely think I'm now thinking I might have it completely wrong. And what I've often talked about is that if you look at human evolution, we've effectively in some form existed for about 2 million years, but our basic primary operating system hasn't evolved. All right, and that we are literally still the same as we were 100,000 years ago, 1 million years ago, 2 million, in the way that we primary react to the outside world and what's going on. And I've always been steadfast about this until about 35 minutes ago. And that I've often said that the biggest problem humans have is we've effectively gone from 2 million years to about, give or take, 500-600 years ago, and then 200 years ago, and then you may as well say the last 24 years. And because the internet just changed things in a way that nobody predicted, because nobody saw social media, let alone what you and I are doing now. But I've always argued we're still on the same operating system, and that's the problem. But I'm wondering, going back to that earlier point, no, that's not the problem. The problem is just the way that we think about the problem.
It is, yeah, but you can't discount what you just said. We
I feel
react.
better for that.
Fight and flight is still there. That's still the way we operate, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get in the way of. I have a chapter in the first book called I over E, intellect over emotion, and I'm not telling people you can't emote, but I'm saying and it's what I do all the time. It's another answer to your question. How do I do what I do? I take the emotions and stick them back there. I said,
Yeah.
okay, I don't care how I feel about this. I need to get all the facts first. I'll put my feeling about the facts in later, but I want all the facts first. We don't do that. We still operate with I'm either going to come at you or I'm going to get the heck out of here. And in the middle of those two, evolutionary bookends, if you will, is
Mm.
negotiation and is communication. We haven't mastered those yet. And now we're at a pace where it's going so fast that we're not listening, and we can't master that until we listen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That does make sense, because, like you say, is the one thing that, because my point has always been to people is that you've got to understand the primary operating system is just concerned with keeping you alive, and it doesn't differentiate between that there was once a tiger or a lion or another tribe, and you feeling uncomfortable buying milk from your local shop. It's just like, oh, if you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe I need to put you on high alert. And because there's, in a sense, we don't have a reason to actually flee, the kind of the emotions, the body and everything becomes overstimulated. It's like, I tell you what, let's just be better to be safe than sorry. Drop the milk, have a panic attack in the middle of the shop, and run. But once upon a time, you did that for real. So your body, right, and your subconscious, in a sense, separated the difference between, do I just need to be alert, or do I really need to run? Is this a strange environment, or is this a safe environment? And if it's safe, we can relax. If it's a strange environment or a new environment, we can be alert. And as long as we're alert, we'll know the difference of when to run and when to relax. Whereas I think we've lost that kind of where we used to transition between all of those steps. I think that's kind of just, because somebody will get into an argument over a comment in social media and take it so personally that it'd be like the person's grabbed you by the throat in real life. Well, they're 1,000 miles away in a different state, different country.
You made the point, and it's an accurate point, just a moment ago when you said it hasn't changed. I always say it's like, our fight and flight and all that anger and all those things that designed just to keep us alive. It's kind of like the chassis that keeps running us. We can put the car with all the amenities and everything on top. It's running on the same chassis. What we've done is, instead of running or fighting based on survival, it's not physical survival anymore. Now it's emotional survival. So now we look at what could possibly threaten us emotionally, and we either fight them, like you just talked about. We see it on social media, we attack, or we get the heck out of there based upon our emotions. We have now confused emotional survival with physical survival, where it doesn't really belong, because most of those times we're not going to be it's not going to kill us or hurt us. I mean, in some places it's more dangerous. However, in industrial cultures, in cultures where we have all of the things that we need, we don't normally have that type of need. But what we've done is we haven't gotten to the point where we've moved it out of our lives, or minimize it at least. We have decided to keep it and reapply it, and we're applying it emotionally. So now there we go. We're fighting or running based upon our emotions, and our emotions being attached to our physicality. That's the next step up, physical then emotional. Well, that gets confused, and we really believe that there's danger by this person saying, well, my political views are this, and then posting it, and you say, oh, no, you're not. I have to get that out of there, or I'm getting out of this altogether, and I'm going to just get you off my social list here. We still haven't made that one change. And again, that factors into the decisions I've made. I see people are doing that. So I'm not giving them space in what I write to do that.
Yeah. Where did it begin for you? Like, what was childhood into becoming, to getting into this, and university, and how did it all start for you?
For me, some people train to be something they say I want to be. Some people, like myself, it's just was what I was going to be. I was always introspective as a kid. I mean, I was involved in all the sports and out there socially with the boys and and doing everything. But it was always that other piece that was always going and watching people right from the beginning. I knew how my friends thought and operated
Yeah.
when we were 7 or 8 years old. I could see it. And by the time I got into high school, I was everybody's person to talk to. So it was natural going to psychology when I went to university and graduate school, and I decided to take a very diversified curriculum, normal psychology, abnormal social research, everything, so that I would be better educated. And then when I came out, I took jobs for the first 10 years in 6 or 7 different places to get those skills and those reference points. So it's been almost 40 years I'm in private practice, and this is the culmination now. I'm getting close to where, I'm still seeing people, not as much as before, but doing a lot of writing and now getting the word out on a grander scale.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that after, like you say, 40 years of private practice, and you're starting something completely afresh. Yeah, because
Yeah,
that must be amazing to have not lost any of the passion.
well, go back to what we said, however, it is the same chassis. It's still helping people,
Yeah,
but now I've redefined the way the top of the car looks, so to speak. I'm still counseling people. I love that. I love to be with people, and that fuels everything that I do. But on the other hand, now it's okay. Let's move it out. Because I'm not going to do this forever. But writing, I can put all this knowledge into a written format, and a lot more people are picking those points up.
is it like it's very difficult to give an overgeneralization of advice, but are there any important points that for people who just, because I mean it's like, like there's anxiety, there's depression, there's addiction, which you've got coming out, there's the anger handbook. Are there anything, if you ever looked at it, would you, like, you could say, this might be a crude assessment, but if I look at people say, I'm always struggling to stay fit, the first thing I'll ask them is, how consistent are you? And typically, as a general rule of thumb, excluding an injury, somebody will say, oh yeah, I'm not that consistent. They'll pretend they are, and eventually when you break it down, you'll prove to them a timeline of, yeah, you've not been doing it 4 times a week, have you, consistently for 52 weeks? So you've not been consistent. Is there a pattern that you see with any of this?
Oh, sure. The pattern is we want to be as comfortable as we possibly can be, and we don't want to do the work. And that's what I tell people. To make changes and be happy requires a number of things. First thing is to be very honest with yourself. And honesty is honesty when you feel it, when you feel uncomfortable, then you're honest. You want to be able to slow down enough to think so your emotions aren't ruling the discourse. Otherwise, that's going to be a problem. You definitely want to have a plan for what you're going to do. And that consistency thing is, again, learning is a function of repetition over time. You're going to continue to do it. What I teach is what I do every day. And people say, you have to do this every day. And I say, no, I love to do it every day. If you're not going to love this, and that's a big key to what I preach, is if you're going to make the change, you're going to look at the things that have to change, and you're going to get up every day and say, yeah, I'm in, let's go. If you're not going to do that, you're going to be fighting yourself, and you always lose when you fight yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult thing, isn't it? We do love comfort, and often the things that serve us best are on the other side of that comfort. But you then, like you say, you end up fighting something you don't want to do because it's just uncomfortable. And yeah, we do. Is there a reason? This might be going off track slightly. That despite our best knowledge, we do things we know are going to be harmful to us.
Always, we are immediate gratification people, and it's kind of the credit card phenomenon. I'll buy it now and I'm not worrying about it, and I'll pay it later. And if and I know I have to pay, and I'll buy something for $2,000, and by the time I'm done paying it off, it's $4,000, and I don't even think about that because I got what I wanted at the time. And that's the way our minds tend to work. And the thing is that almost always those things that we're buying we don't need. They are not part of our needs. They're part of our desires, our wants. So we get wrapped up in it, and that has us so sidetracked. Life is simple. There's only a few things that we really need. And again, that's another thing I do. I don't complicate my life by saying I've got to have that, I've got to have this thing. I just don't.
Because that's interesting. Because so would that be a better one of the things I've often been fascinated with, and this is applied to myself, is what I would call self-sabotaging. But is it actually just reacting to instant gratification, and self-sabotaging is the wrong label?
It is essentially pretty close to the same thing. We react, we want immediate gratification, and when we decide to give in to that, we've sabotaged other parts of our lives. I think it is the way I look at it. I decide what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. What I'm not going to do, I never give myself permission to do. And, I'm 69 years old. I still work out heavy every day. When we get done here, I will go down for an hour today and I'll do my workout. And people say, don't you get tired of it? I said, I never even think about it. Wouldn't think about it. It is going to happen. It's as simple as that. I have a little training center. We have basements here. I have a training center in the basement, and it has music and TV. If I want it, I play music, and it's in my time, and I love being down there, and I work out, and I stay in shape. And those are some of the secrets to life. When you talk to people who've been around 100 years and they're still happy, and they say, what did you do? And they say, I kept it simple. I didn't react to everything. I did the same things. I put a routine in. I stayed consistent with that. And it's almost the secret of almost all of them. They didn't go overboard. They didn't bring stress into their lives that they didn't need.
Because I like the way it was worded, because and I'm definitely somebody that's used these terms up, so I'm definitely guilty about that. When somebody says self-sabotage, that's arguing that you kind of have a habit or a ritual and a routine that's always going to damage you. But when you look at it from a different perspective, the point of view of, no, it's instant gratification, it's like, oh, hang on a second, I'm not sabotaging myself, I'm reacting to a thought, an emotion, an impulse. I'm reacting to an impulse. Because self-sabotage is almost like suggesting it's a self. Yeah, it's conscious, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that regardless of how hard I try and discipline myself, I'm always going to do that. It's ingrained in me like leaves growing on the trees at springtime. It's just like, it's inevitable, I can't. But actually, when you're like, no, it's reacting, it's self-gratification. It's like, all right, this is something in theory, in principle, that if I went for a walk, I wouldn't want it. I will. If I just say, if I still want it in an hour from now, okay, go for a walk, see if you can distract yourself and lose that emotion attached to the impulse, you're probably not going to respond to it, and you're not self-sabotaging anymore. You're controlling your impulses.
And that's the key to it. I tell people, example I use is online shopping. I say, you'll go to Amazon and you say, oh, I want that in the cart, and then check out. And I always say, put it in your cart, walk away. Now think about, do I really need this? How much is it going to cost? How much is it, do I have this in my budget? Is it something I'm genuinely going to use? Or is it eye candy and my neighbor has one and I'm going to be socially with the flow if I get it? And ask yourself all these questions. Now go back and say, do I really, really need this? Almost every time you'll come up with a no.
Yeah, definitely.
But in the moment, your emotions grabbed it and said, look, and then you click yes. and then you walked away and it came in the mail and you looked at it and you didn't have, the fascination wasn't there anymore.
Yeah,
It just wasn't.
it's up there on the shelf with the other things I haven't opened.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's. I've got that bouncing around my head now, just that rewording of that, because again, going back to listening and communicating, it's how we communicate what we do and how and why we do things that can make what seem like impossible steps actually extremely simple steps to take.
They can, and I'll do that in my own mind. I'll reword things in my own mind. Okay, this is the way I've always thought about it. Well, let me take that idea and change it a little bit and see how it flows. In my own head, I'll do that. People are in their own heads every day. We talk to ourselves all day long in our heads. We don't realize that. So I just make the language a little bit more conscious. I keep it positive, and I redo things in my own head. I think about things and I redo them in my head. See where it goes. If I'm going to be in my head and I'm going to be talking, so to speak, I might as well do something with it that's productive. And so that also helps in my communication with other people, because I'm willing to entertain what they have to say. Didn't say I have to go with it, but I'll at least hear it.
Just getting ready to finish up, just a couple of more questions. If you could think of a younger version of yourself, it could be before you ever did psychology, or when you'd come out of university or first started private practice. I don't mind who it is or when that version of you exists. But if you could sit in a room with them now, what would they say to you about everything that you've achieved and what you're doing next?
If I were a younger version of myself?
Yes, so imagine a younger version of yourself, right? But they get to almost see, like, this is everything you're going to do and where you're going to be at 69. What would they say to you about the life you've had?
I think they'd be happy with it. I think that I've met struggles head on. I've always had the bigger picture in my mind. I've always had what I feel is the greater good, and my faith and all those things are in play at all times. So I think they say, you know what, you've done a good job. We all would look at something and we say, we'll tweak this a little bit or tweak that. But for the most part, I wouldn't change much, if anything.
I actually think that if you could, because we often reflect back on things and say, I wish I'd done it differently. And I actually think if you could talk to the younger version of yourself who gets to see how you came through it, they'd actually say you did a lot better than you realised.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'd be much kinder to us than we are. Looking forward, they'd be much kinder than we are in reflection.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and that's something I've constantly thought about in the past. Though I've made a decision to say, ease up. Don't be so serious about this thing. The past is over. It has no life. There's no point in bringing it into today unless I need some wisdom from there. But and the future is not here. I mean, why worry about that? I'll plan for what I have to plan for. But for the most part, I think we're just too hard on ourselves. And we think we don't measure up all the time. And to what?
Yeah.
That's always people. I don't measure up. I say, to what? And they give me this person or that. I said, no, what's your ideal? What do you want to measure up to? Because if you know what you want to measure up to, you can get it.
Yeah, I often say to people, if you're going to beat yourself up, do it with a feather.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, know what you want. Know what you want for you. That's the first key. I tell people, know what you want, because if you don't know what you want, you're getting in a car and you're driving in circles. Know what you want. Then you can decide where you want to go and how you're going to get there. But know what you want.
And I think that's probably, when I talk to a lot of people, I do think that's possibly, and I could be wrong, but one of the number one difficulties people have, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, is they don't know what they want, and they focus on something that's way out of who they are, instead of, as I was saying earlier, what do you just enjoy? What actually makes you happy? And I stumbled upon this by accident, and it's evolved a little bit now because I actually have a coffee machine and everything in my office behind me, like a proper. But many years ago, and I mean like 10, 11, 12 years ago, whatever it was, I used to go to the gym near where I live, walk along the river, about a 5-minute walk into the centre of the city of Salisbury, near where I live, and go and have a cup of coffee and just watch the world for half an hour. And it was only one day when somebody disturbed me from that practice that I realised I was irritated. And then I realised I just like put two and two together. So for whatever reason, I just like going down to the coffee shop and either reading a book for half an hour or people watching for 45 minutes, whatever it is. And at the moment of realising how much pleasure that gave me on a really deep level, I stopped questioning why and just never let anybody interrupt me from it again. To the point now that I now have my own coffee machine, and my routine is that I'll come in the morning, sit down, have a cup of coffee, read some make myself a cup of coffee, read some emails, maybe watch a bit of YouTube, whatever. But I don't do anything work-wise, and I don't let people interrupt me. I just enjoy that 30 minutes.
And that's what I tell people. Have those things. Have your time. Create your day. Be productive. Be happy. It's really, as they say, not rocket science. It's just simply setting it down. At the end of the day, be able to put your head on the pillow and say, all right, I did well today. I accomplished what I needed to accomplish. I was happy. I helped other people. That's big for me. I want to know who I helped today because that's why I think I'm here. And then it's done. But know what you want. Know how you're going to get there.
Do you think it trips us up that it's actually much more simple than we want it to be?
Yes.
Because
when it's simple, we don't trust it.
Yeah.
That's it? That's all? No. There's got to be more. We all have this in our mind. There's got to be more to it. I'm just this simple. Yes, that's who you are. We are simple human beings who actually are happiest when we are simply enjoying.
You've just opened
ourselves.
up another thought for me. So I'd always gone the other way. I'd always thought it was because things are overcomplicated, or if they're not overcomplicated, we don't believe in them. And that's what puts us off. Oh, well, that's really complicated, I can't do it. But it's not. It's because it's so simple, we don't trust it.
We don't trust it, and we feel as though it doesn't have enough in there. But that's not enough to make me happy. Come on, we hear it all the time. The world has so much in it. Go get it. Go get what?
But I'm 49 years old, and in the space of an hour, I've just learned two things I hadn't realised. And it's just the point of view I had on the same subject. It's not. Yeah, it's because we don't trust it when it's too simple.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all you need to hammer in a nail is a hammer and nail.
Exactly. So if you think about it, all you did was open your mind up, which is what I've been telling you that I do. You just opened your mind up. It's a different point of view. Okay, let me see how that resonates. And now, so there's the introduction of it. Now through your day and your week, it'll pop in and you'll see where it goes as it attaches to other things. And that's how life works. That's all I do every day.
Just simplify it.
Mm-hmm.
So, lastly, and this is the random one you may have heard me say, because I just like listening to people, what they tell me about it, is completely imagination. If you could go anywhere in time, anytime, any place, anywhere, where would you go? Why would you go there? What would you be driving? And what music would you listen to?
If I could do that, I would, it's interesting. I had all these things, the things you love, with time travel and the old Viking stuff, and even in your country, back to the knights and all that. I'm fascinated by all that. But interesting, I would probably just simply go back into the 50s and 60s where it was really simple, where we trusted each other, the Woodstock age, and so to speak, and everyone just loved each other. All the basic amenities were there, but we were able to connect on a human level. I thoroughly enjoyed that. If there's anything that I see lost today, or it's different today, is that we don't take the time to do those things. Family was different, faith was different, education, everything was different, you know. I was talking to someone. We used to the school I live in. I'm in Pennsylvania, here in the United States. I'm about an hour and a half from New York, an hour and a half from Philly. So I'm kind of away far enough not to have to be in the metropolis, but close enough to get there if I need to. But in our town, when we used to go to school, the guys would hunt. It's
Yeah.
country, and the guys would hunt after school, so they'd put their guns in the car and sometimes show the teacher at school. Now, if you bring a plastic gun into school, the police are coming to get you. So I just want to go back to that. I would want to go back even for a day to that simple time and just
Yeah.
look at go in the local hardware store and the local deli and talk to people and sit on at the counter and say some nice things. Wonderful.
I do say to people, like, growing up in the 70s and the 80s, it wasn't easier, but it was just simpler.
It was so much simpler.
And we'll stop there. Thank you very much for your time. I really, really enjoyed this so much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And please do check out the links for the Fix Yourself series. There's Fix Your Anxiety, Fix Your Depression, Fix Your Anger, the Fix Yourself Handbooks. And you can see, like, let's just keep things simple. And you can take big steps in a little way to improve your life. As I said, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. As always, thank you very much for listening, because I do appreciate it. And wherever you are, whatever you believe, please take care of yourself, be blessed, and see you next time.